April 29th, 1945. Berlin is burning. The night air trembles with the roar of collapsing stone, the crack of rifle fire, and the unending thud of artillery echoing through ruined streets. Smoke swirls between the shattered buildings, black and oily, blotting out the stars. Inside the bunker of the Reich Chancellery, men once worshipped as gods now whisper like ghosts. The empire they built on fear is dissolving into dust. Far from the front, a convoy of 3 black trucks slithers through the outskirts of the city. Their headlights are dimmed, their insignia torn away. Inside the lead vehicle sits a man staring out the cracked windshield. SS Obersturmbannführer Erich Vogel. Once he commanded hundreds. Now only a handful remain. His gloved hand rests on a battered leather case resting on his knees. Inside it lies his last hope: forged documents, Swiss bank notes, and a list of safe houses stretching from Innsbruck to Milan. As the trucks cross the city's edge, Vogel glances back toward the orange glow of Berlin. The Führer's voice still echoes from the radio in the seat beside him, shouting of loyalty, victory, destiny. Vogel switches it off. He has no use for destiny anymore. Only survival. The road south is slick with rain and ash. Columns of refugees stumble alongside them. Mothers pushing carts, wounded soldiers limping, children clutching dolls with no faces left. The SS trucks pass without slowing. No one dares look up. By dawn, the convoy reaches the foothills of the Bavarian Alps. The mountains rise like walls, their peaks crowned with late snow. There, hidden among the pines, stands a villa built of gray stone and secrecy. Its windows are shuttered, its chimneys cold. To the world, it does not exist. To the men arriving now, it is called the Committee's Refuge. Inside, 5 officers gather around a heavy oak table. Their uniforms bear no rank, their pistols lie within reach. A single lamp burns between them, casting long shadows that stretch like claws across the walls. They speak in low tones, names, contacts, routes. Each word is weighted with fear. Vogel takes the head of the table. He studies their faces: Muller, the logistics officer who once supervised trainloads of laborers; Dietrich, the camp doctor who knows too much about experiments in the East; Steiner, the quartermaster who arranged gold shipments through Switzerland; and finally, a newcomer, an SS captain with a bandaged arm, introduced as Otto Weiss. Vogel's voice cuts through the silence. Gentlemen, the Reich is finished. But our work, our survival, depends on what happens in the next 72 hours. Everything we have must vanish before the Americans arrive. He opens the leather case. Inside, stacks of foreign passports and Vatican transit letters gleam under the lamp's light. New identities, he says. New lives. For those who stay silent. The men exchange uneasy glances. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls, or maybe artillery. Weiss lowers his gaze, concealing the flicker of emotion in his eyes. Beneath the SS uniform, he is not what he seems. His real name isn't Weiss at all. He is a Czech resistance agent, embedded through forged orders and chaos. His mission: trace the stolen Alpine gold and expose those who plan to escape with it. As the meeting drags on, Vogel speaks of safe passage through Italy, of contacts in Genoa who can arrange ships to South America. He mentions bankers willing to sanitize their assets. The others nod, clinging to the illusion of control. But beneath their composure lies something else: the creeping scent of panic. Night falls early in the mountains. The men retreat to their rooms, each haunted by the sound of distant thunder. Vogel remains alone in the study. He pours a measure of schnapps and lights a cigarette with shaking hands. His reflection in the window stares back at him, hollow-eyed and tired. He remembers the oath he swore to the Reich, the speeches about purity, the banners fluttering like blood against the sky. Now all that remains is smoke. A knock breaks the silence. It's Weiss. Obersturmbannführer, he says softly. I've sealed the files. Communications cut as ordered. Vogel nods, dismissing him. When the door closes, he exhales slowly. Something about that man unsettles him. Too calm. Too precise. Outside, snow begins to fall, light, soundless, merciless. It covers the villa like a burial shroud. In the attic, a radio crackles faintly before going dead. Somewhere down the corridor, footsteps echo. Then silence again. The next morning, Vogel gathers the men in the dining hall. His tone is clipped. From this point forward, no one leaves alone. No transmissions. We move at dawn. South. Steiner protests, mumbling about weather and terrain. Vogel cuts him off. The Americans will be here within days. We must reach the Italian border before they seal the passes. As they disperse, Vogel notices something glinting near his chair. A folded slip of paper, tucked into the seam of his coat. He unfolds it. Written in neat, careful script. One among you serves another master. The blood drains from his face. He scans the room, empty now, except for the dying embers in the hearth. The note trembles in his hand. Outside, the wind moans through the pines like a warning. He burns the paper in the fire, watching the words curl and vanish. But he knows their meaning will not fade. Someone here is not who they claim to be. And before the sun rises again, Vogel swears he will find out who. The night inside the villa turned colder than the mountain air outside. Vogel did not sleep. He sat behind the heavy desk in the study, the shutters barred, the fire sunk low to embers. He laid out his pistol, the forged passports, and a hand-drawn map of the Alpine passes. His jaw was tight, his eyes red. He was no longer planning an escape. He was hunting a traitor. Down the corridor, the others whispered in pairs. Men who had barked orders for years now kept their voices low like thieves. Loyalty had evaporated the moment Berlin started to burn. At 2:10, a muffled sound carried through the stone halls. One sharp crack, then another. By morning, 2 chairs in the dining hall sat empty. No one asked where Muller or Dietrich had gone. Steiner did not meet Vogel's eyes. Weiss kept his face carefully calm, but his heartbeat jumped in his throat. He could feel it. The danger had shifted. Whatever this was, it was no longer just escape. It was elimination. At first light, the convoy formed. They abandoned the trucks. The roads were no longer safe. American reconnaissance units had been reported near Garmisch. French armored patrols had been seen pushing up from the south. Rumor said the Soviets were already interrogating captured SS in Vienna. Rumor said those men were not dying quickly. So they moved on foot. For men, 2 mules. 2 sleds modified to drag the cargoes up through the treeline. And the cargoes were not luggage. Under oilcloth and rope were steel cases stamped with false farm markings. Inside the cases lay dull, heavy bars the color of old straw. Each bar had weight. History. Blood. Jewelry melted down. Teeth melted down. Wedding bands stripped in cellars without windows. They called it the Alpine Reserve. Weiss had heard other names for it. They began the climb in silence just before dawn, under a bruised gray sky and a bitter wind that cut the lungs. Snow crunched under their boots. Ice groaned under the metal runners. No one spoke unless they had to. Twice they froze in place at the distant sound of engines. Once aircraft, somewhere above the clouds, searching. Another time, a vehicle, far down the valley road. Vogel controlled the pace. He walked slightly ahead, scanning for tracks, for glinting glass, for the unnatural shape of a rifle barrel waiting behind a rock. This was not new ground to him. He had trained men up here years ago. There were cabins, stashes, marked trees. He knew every safe turn. He also knew every place a man could disappear forever. They stopped only once before midday, inside a narrow cut of pines shielded from aerial view. Weiss knelt and pretended to adjust the wrapping on his arm while his other hand slid beneath his coat. Hidden in the bandage, small and illegal in a German uniform, was a British-made signal set. Not a transmitter, just a flare code. Directional. Short range. Enough to tell someone watching from a ridge where to be. He had not used it. Not yet. He looked up and saw Vogel watching him. Vogel's eyes were steady. Calculating. Not angry. Not yet. Hours dragged. The climb steepened. The air thinned. The world narrowed to breath and ice. Steiner stumbled twice, muttered that he couldn't feel his fingers, then snapped at Weiss for not helping with the weight. Vogel said nothing, only flicked his eyes toward Steiner's pack. Switch, Vogel ordered. Steiner hesitated, then obeyed. When he lifted Weiss's pack, he realized it wasn't gear inside. It was documents, folded files, contact names, account numbers, Swiss contact numbers, Vatican contact numbers, Argentine contact numbers, transit codes, all of it memorized by Vogel, of course, but still carried hard, physical, in case he didn't make it. Weiss saw what Steiner saw. Steiner also saw something else, shoved deep in the side sleeve, a small metal tube with colored caps. Signal device. Weiss watched Steiner's face change. That was almost the moment he died. Almost. They made camp in a natural ice hollow near a rock face just before dark. Wind howled overhead, but barely reached them here. From above, they would look like part of the mountainside, white on white, indistinguishable. Perfect for hiding. Perfect for dying. Vogel lit a lamp, low and hooded, barely more than a candle. He said nothing for a long time. Then, in a tone too calm to be casual, he said, "Remove your gloves." The others froze. Weiss felt the cold settle like a blade in his spine. Steiner swallowed. "Why?" Vogel didn't answer. He only lifted his pistol and leveled it at Steiner's chest. Slowly, the gloves came off. For bare pairs of hands hovered in the flickering yellow light, shaking from cold and from something that was not cold. Vogel's gaze passed over them one by one. He was not looking at fingers. He was looking at ink. The SS liked order. The SS loved records. And the SS, in certain branches, marked its men. Blood group tattoos. Unit markings. Identification codes. Proof of belonging. Proof of guilt. Proof useful to an interrogator. "What did I tell you last night?" Vogel asked quietly. No one answered. "I said," Vogel continued, "from this point forward, no one leaves alone. No transmissions." His eyes settled on Steiner. "And yet," Vogel said, almost softly, someone tried. He reached forward and with 2 fingers pulled the small signal tube from Steiner's coat. Steiner went pale. "It's not what you think," Steiner said. The shot was deafening in the hollow. For a long time afterward, no one spoke. Only the wind spoke, and it spoke in long, low groans across the stone. Vogel didn't bother to move the body. He only dragged Steiner's pack toward himself and opened it. Inside, food, rope, spare socks, ammunition, and a folded scrap of paper that did not belong to Steiner. Vogel unfolded it. It was a hand-sketched map of the high ridge ahead, marked with an X and a time. 7:10. Tomorrow. Weiss felt his chest tighten. That was not Steiner's handwriting. That was his. The timing wasn't perfect anymore. The ambush window was blown open. The situation had just become lethal. Not because of the Allies, but because Vogel now had proof that someone in his dwindling circle had given their position away. Vogel raised his head slowly. He looked at Weiss for a long, burning second. Then he did something Weiss didn't expect. He said very evenly, "We move at 4 o'clock. We reach the pass before first light. Anyone who falls behind stays behind." He didn't shoot Weiss. Not yet. The message was worse than a bullet. It said, "I know. And I want you alive. For now." The last hours of that night stretched like wire. Weiss did not sleep. His mind raced. His arm throbbed from the fake bandage. His ribs hurt from breathing too shallow in the cold. He replayed the route in his head. He replayed the signal timing. He replayed the one rule of his mission that had never changed. The gold must not leave the mountains. If he failed, men like Vogel would not vanish. They would reinvent themselves. With money, a war criminal becomes a businessman. Without money, a war criminal becomes a prisoner. He could not let Vogel reach Italy. At 3:58, Vogel kicked snow over the fire and snapped, "Up." They moved. And now the mountains changed. The safe treeline broke open into jagged stone and hard-packed ice. The path narrowed to a ledge barely wider than a boot. One slip here, and a man would not stop falling until spring thaw. Below them, the world was still black. Above them, the first thin, colorless hint of morning had begun to touch the highest ridges. Weiss could feel it in his bones. They were close. He knew the ravine. He had marked it for the Allies. The terrain funneled everything, men, animals, sound, into a tight choke point between 2 rock walls scarred by old glacial pressure. Perfect sight lines from above. Minimal cover below. No way around without hours of backtracking they didn't have. Vogel knew it too. Weiss saw his head lift. Saw his shoulders tense. Saw his hand drift toward his sidearm. Then it happened. The first shot cracked from the ridge like lightning hitting stone. Then another. Then 5 more in fast succession. One of the mules screamed and collapsed, the sled snapping sideways, gold spilling like teeth onto the ice. Weiss dropped flat and rolled behind a rock outcrop, snow exploding around him as rounds tore into the ground. Steiner would have panicked here. Muller would have run. Dietrich would have begged. All of them were gone now. Only Vogel and Weiss remained in the open throat of the mountains, pinned between 2 walls of stone and an enemy they couldn't see. Voices echoed from above, distorted by the ravine. "Hands where we can see them. SS, surrender now." The accents were mixed. English, Czech, maybe even Polish. Partisans, Allied recon, mountain troops. It didn't matter. It meant the net had closed. Weiss risked a glance and saw silhouettes on the ridge. Figures in white smocks against white snow, rifles braced, calm, deliberate. They had been waiting for hours in that cold. Waiting for him to lead the convoy into the kill zone. Then, through the chaos, he saw something else. Movement, 10 feet to his left. Vogel. Not running. Advancing. Vogel moved low and fast through the drifting snow like an animal, using the broken sled as partial cover. He didn't look panicked. He looked focused. He reached Weiss in 3 long strides, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him against the rock. Weiss tried to speak. Vogel didn't let him. The muzzle flash lit the ravine for a split second like a camera bulb. The shot hit Weiss' center mass. His body folded. Vogel let him drop and turned, sprinting into the fog and fractured light, dragging the leather case and one of the steel boxes behind him. Bullets chased him. Shouts followed him. Then he hit a blind pocket of mist and ice and was gone. Just gone. The gunfire slowed, then stopped. The mountain went quiet again, except for Weiss struggling to breathe and the mule kicking weakly in the snow. Minutes passed. Boots crunched on ice. Shapes descended carefully from the ridge, weapons ready. Weiss felt hands on him. Rough, fast, urgent. Someone pressed fabric against his chest. Someone said his real name. Someone said, "Stay with me. Stay with me. You did it." He couldn't answer. His vision was blurring out at the edges, black eating gray, gray eating white. He had one thought left. Not Vogel. Not the gunshot. Not the gold. The map. He forced his hand up, weak, shaking, and pushed it into the pocket of the man leaning over him. Fingers closed around burned paper. He managed to whisper one word. Lake. The rescuers looked at each other. They unfolded the scorched scrap. The lines were barely there, warped by heat and ash, but still visible. Arrows. Depth markings. A name. Toplitz. Lake Toplitz. Cold. Deep. Quiet. A perfect grave. And not just for men. For secrets. For money. For the last clean path out. For the last dirty path forward. Weiss exhaled and went still. High above, the first full light of morning finally touched the ridge. The men standing over him did not yet understand what they were holding. They thought they had intercepted a smuggling run. They thought they had stopped a handful of fleeing officers. They didn't know yet that what lay at the bottom of those waters would outlive the war. They didn't know yet that the story wasn't ending here in the snow. It was spreading, because Erich Vogel was still out there, somewhere in the white, carrying enough stolen weight to buy himself a brand new future. And there was still one question no one could answer. Who exactly was waiting to sell him that future? May 1945. The war in Europe was over, but the silence that followed victory was filled with ghosts. The Allies celebrated in the streets of Paris, London, and New York. Yet, in the mountains of Austria, soldiers still stumbled upon the remnants of an empire built on lies. Among them lay steel crates cracked open by frost, their contents gleaming dully under the sun, gold bars stamped with eagles and swastikas, medical instruments, counterfeit British pounds. But the biggest discovery was a map, burned and fragile, with a single word written across its top, Toplitz. The rumors began almost immediately. Locals spoke of SS divers dropping boxes into the dark lake as American troops advanced. Fishermen swore they heard engines in the night, saw lanterns flicker along the shoreline, then vanish. The water swallowed everything, as if the lake itself conspired to hide what humanity had tried to forget. In the chaos of surrender, the Allies arrested thousands of SS men. Interrogations filled the first weeks of peace. Some confessed quickly, others lied until the rope tightened. Yet the name Erich Vogel appeared again and again, attached to shipments, to false identities, to whispers of the committee. Each document led investigators deeper into a web that stretched from Munich to Innsbruck, from Italy to the Swiss border. But the man himself was gone. Then came the first twist. A Czech partisan recovering in an American field hospital identified himself as Otto Weiss. He had survived the bullet wound that should have killed him in the mountains. Rescued by Allied scouts, he spent weeks in fever and silence before speaking. When he finally did, he told a story that chilled his interrogators, a story of a dying Reich trying to purchase resurrection with blood and gold. His testimony led to hidden caches across Austria, tunnels packed with art, banknotes, and military archives. He spoke of Vogel and the committee, of secret Vatican channels and bankers in Zurich willing to erase pasts for a price. Weiss became a quiet asset, working under Allied protection as investigators hunted what was left of the Nazi network. But Vogel was always one step ahead. In 1946, a train derailed near Brenner Pass carrying cargo listed as machinery. Inside the crates were Nazi medals, personal diaries, and Venezuelan entry visas. One of the passports bore a familiar face under a new name, Ernst Voigt. The trail went cold again. Years passed. Europe rebuilt. New wars started elsewhere. The world turned its attention to the future. But some people couldn't forget. Historians, treasure hunters, and journalists kept chasing the whisper of the Alpine gold. Each dive into Lake Toplitz brought up more mystery: corroded ammunition, crates of counterfeit notes from Operation Bernhard, fragments of aircraft. Yet none of it proved the existence of the missing fortune or the man who had once commanded it. Then, in 1952, another name surfaced in Buenos Aires. A German émigré called Erich Vogler had taken a position as a security consultant for a shipping company dealing in South American exports. His manner was precise, his accent unmistakably Bavarian, his right hand marked by a faint burn scar. The company's ships were rumored to carry more than coffee and textiles. They carried history, gold melted and recast, art untraceable, documents that could rewrite lives. Witnesses later described him as polite, distant, almost spectral. He spoke little of the war. When asked where he had been in 1945, he would smile faintly and say, "On the wrong side of the mountains." Whether the man was truly Vogel, no one could prove. The fingerprints filed by Interpol were inconclusive, blurred by time and bureaucracy. And then, as quickly as he appeared, he was gone again. A decade later, in 1963, divers exploring a flooded cave near Lake Toplitz found something unexpected. A human skeleton, partially preserved by the cold, wedged between rocks 30 meters below the surface. The skull bore a single bullet hole. Nearby lay a corroded Luger pistol and a fragment of a leather strap, the kind used on military cases. The Austrian police identified the remains tentatively as Erich Vogel through matching dental records. Yet some historians argued the body was planted, a convenient ending to an inconvenient story. No one could say for certain whether Vogel had drowned in the same waters he used to hide his crimes, or if he had lived long enough to see his fortune reborn under new flags. Today, the lake is still there. Its surface glitters serenely under the Austrian sun, tourists strolling its banks unaware of what lies beneath. The water is calm, but deep, so deep that light fades long before the bottom. Divers who descend describe an eerie silence, a pressure that feels like memory itself pressing down. Many emerge shaken. Some never return. Every few years, another expedition is announced. Scientists, treasure hunters, historians hoping to uncover the truth. They lower cameras into the dark, their lights cutting thin paths through centuries of silt. Each time, the story grows. Rumors of lost gold, sealed crates, the last confessions of men who refused to die with their empire. Maybe the lake holds the final chapter. Maybe it holds nothing but water and the ghosts of greed. But the question remains, did the SS truly die with Hitler, or did they simply change uniforms? Because in the decades that followed, Europe saw familiar faces reemerge in boardrooms, ministries, and intelligence agencies. Men once devoted to the Reich quietly became useful to new governments, new wars, new agendas. Operation Paperclip brought German scientists to America. Soviet intelligence absorbed former SS experts. And in the shadow between justice and utility, the line blurred until morality itself seemed negotiable. That was the SS' final victory, not in battle but in survival. Evil that learns to adapt is never fully defeated. It hides in plain sight, polished and renamed, pretending to serve progress. Just as Vogel once did. The mountain winds still whisper through the pines above Lake Toplitz. At night, locals say you can hear chains rattling deep beneath the surface, as if something restless is still moving below. Maybe it's only the current. Maybe it's the gold. Or maybe it's the past, refusing to stay buried. Whatever truth lies beneath those waters, one thing is certain. When the war ended, not every war was over. Because history doesn't sleep. It waits. If stories like this remind you that history still hides in the shadows, don't let them fade into silence. Share this video. Let others know what still lies beneath those Austrian lakes. Hit the like button, because every click helps uncover another forgotten secret from the front lines. And subscribe to WW2 Frontline Legends, the place where truth, courage, and mystery meet. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from around the world. Your city, your flag, your story. Because together, we keep history alive, one legend at AT. IME.